Hello everyone, I'm Jack Fisher and welcome to my world. And when it comes to Batman movies, I consider myself very fortunate. You see, I'm old enough to remember almost every major film iteration of Gotham's Dark Knight. I was just a kid when I saw Michael Keaton's Batman, and I was a blossoming comic book fan when George Clooney's infamous Bat Nipples debuted on the big screen. And in a sense, I've been there for the best and worst parts of the modern Batman movie saga. There were some incredible highs, like we had with The Dark Knight. And there were some abysmal lows. See Batman and Robin. And along the way, we saw Batman manifest in other mediums. From the iconic 90s animated series with Kevin Conroy, to more recent shows like Gotham. Every one of them attempted to tell the best possible Batman story. And for a character so iconic and complex, that's not easy. I think most Batman fans would agree that there have been more misses than hits over the decades. But so long as this character resonates, there will always be new takes on his story, as well as big budget movies that try to tell those stories. So with all that in mind, where does Matt Reeves' The Batman fit in? Does this movie succeed in capturing the best of all things Batman like The Dark Knight did? Or does it fall short like Batman Forever? Well, after seeing the movie in a crowded theater on opening night, I'm ready to offer my review, while also attempting to answer those questions. But before I do, I'd like to give a standard spoiler warning. If you haven't seen this movie yet, now is your time to click away. Because in order to truly assess this movie, I'll have to delve into some major spoilers. And make no mistake, this is one of those movies where spoilers do matter. Now, having given that warning, here's my initial impression of the Batman. It's not as great as The Dark Knight. I feel confident in making that statement, subjective it might be. At the same time, I still say it's a damn good Batman movie. Definitely a hit and not a miss. It's too early for me to know where it ranks in the echelon of Batman movies, but it certainly deserves to be in the upper tiers. It's abundantly clear from the first few minutes of the movie. The people who made it really do get Batman. They understand who he is, what makes him tick, and what makes his story so compelling. And those involved clearly read classic Batman comics like The Long Halloween. But beyond those elements, I feel like it's the unique way this movie succeeds that's unlike anything we've ever seen before in a Batman movie. Now, to understand the how and why, it's also necessary to highlight one critical detail. The tone, style, and overall presentation of this movie is not in the mold of a standard superhero movie. If you go into this movie hoping to see something like The Dark Knight or Zack Snyder's Justice League, you're going to be disappointed. Because this movie is less about Batman the superhero and more about Batman the vigilante detective. Now, longtime Batman fans, as well as avid readers of the comics, will appreciate that. Because this is a side of Batman that we don't get to see too often in the movies. More often than not, the story revolves around standard hero versus villain battles. But Matt Reeves and Robert Pattinson take a very different approach in The Batman. This time, there's no origin story in play. There's no elaborate retelling of how Bruce Wayne became Batman, a story so many of us are already familiar with. When this movie begins, Bruce Wayne has been Batman for a couple years now. He is deep in his crusade against crime in Gotham. He's got the fancy suit, the cape, and the awesome car. But almost immediately, we get the sense that he's in a very dark place, literally and figuratively. Despite his best efforts, crime is still surging in Gotham. There's no shortage of people for Batman to beat up, and even though criminals have come to fear him, as is perfectly demonstrated in the first 10 minutes, crime still runs rampant throughout the city. And no matter how strong or capable Batman is, he just can't seem to stop it. And it's here where both the unique structure of the movie and Robert Pattinson's acting skills really come into play. Because I admit, like so many others, I was not overly thrilled when I heard that Pattinson had been cast. I never doubted his acting skills. I even came to respect him a great deal, having navigated a tumultuous career since his days as Edward Cullen in Twilight. He is still very much in the shadow of that role, and the idea of him being Batman might not sit well with people who still see him as the sparkly vampire from Twilight. But even so, the man is a great actor, and he employed the full extent of those skills in this movie. A lot of the story unfolds from his perspective. At many points, the camera actually follows him as he navigates crime scenes, fights, and personal moments. It creates this feeling that we're experiencing the events of this movie through Batman's perspective. We're not just watching him be Batman, we're sharing these struggles with him. And at the heart of that struggle is a major mystery involving multiple characters, many of them familiar to longtime Batman fans. It starts with a murder, as is often the case in major Batman stories. But along with these murders come elaborate riddles, offering clues and insights into why these murders are happening, as well as who will be targeted next. Most of the Batman-savvy audience knows this means the Riddler is the main villain. But even if you're completely ignorant of Batman, even if you've never heard of the character before seeing this movie, you still come to dread and fear this character's presence. We see, again through Batman's perspective, just how capable this guy is. He doesn't have superpowers, he doesn't have access to alien technology. Much like Batman himself, the Riddler is just very smart, very cunning, and very willing to go to extremes in order to achieve his goals. And it's up to Batman, Commissioner Gordon, and later on Selina Kyle to stop him. But as they further those efforts, the mystery only deepens, as does the ominous tone of the movie. Now, when I say this movie is dark, I don't just mean in terms of style and aesthetics. There is no hint of camp in the mold of Adam West's Batman, nor is there any twinge of humor like you would see in a standard Marvel movie. The Batman really does embrace the darker themes of Batman, and that extends to the general cinematography. Most of the scenes in this movie are shot in this dark overtone, as though we're watching these events unfold from the shadows. The audience really doesn't get to see anything the characters on screen can't see. That doesn't just make every major moment feel more intense, it gives more impact to every action along the way. But it's not just the action that complements this overall darkness. The Batman is also unique in how it employs extended silences among the characters. At multiple points in the movie, there are these moments in which the camera just locks onto something or someone, and there's just this eerie silence. Nothing is said outright, and yet it still conveys a message. And again, this is where Pattinson really shines as an actor. We often see through his expression how much he struggles with this mystery and with his many other personal issues. At times, it really does feel like we're watching him work through the clues in his head in real time. And that makes every action and reaction feel more organic and visceral, even when he's not fighting. That's another aspect of this movie that stands out from other Batman movies. In terms of action, the Batman emphasizes quality over quantity. That action, be it fistfights with thugs or a car chase with the Penguin, it's almost always secondary. The mystery and the detective work are always the top priority, right up until the final few minutes of the movie. But within that mystery, there's also a larger story about Batman, Bruce Wayne, and the hero he's becoming. From a purely character perspective, this movie takes the approach that Bruce Wayne is the real mask. Batman is who this man truly is at heart. Minute for minute, Pattinson spends much more time being Batman than he does being Bruce Wayne. And that's very much in keeping with how Batman has been portrayed going all the way back to the 90s animated series. That approach also helps us see Gotham the way Batman truly sees it. It's such a flawed, broken city run by corrupt, greedy people. And early on, Batman isn't even sure he's making a difference. And this is where Selina Kyle's character comes into play. Played by Zoe Kravitz, she offers another important perspective in this story. Because unlike Bruce Wayne, she didn't have the luxury of a trust fund and a butler. She had to live, work, and survive in Gotham's dirtiest slums, learning to fend for herself and take what she could. And yes, she still has a thing for cats, and she never actually goes by the name Catwoman. But the titles don't matter in this movie. What matters is how she, Selina Kyle, impacts Batman's story. Through her, Batman isn't just able to uncover more of the Riddler's plot. He comes to see how Gotham's crime and corruption has hurt the most vulnerable people of the city. People living in poverty, people addicted to drugs, people who also lost their parents and have few others to support them. Many of them are not the least bit helped by Batman's efforts. Just because he helps take down a big crime boss like Salvador Maroni doesn't mean their lives automatically get better. All that really does is create a void for another criminal to fill. It's a hard pill to swallow, but it's also an important aspect of Batman's crusade that often gets overlooked. The whole spectacle of Batman beating a bunch of crazed criminals is fun and all, but what's the point if crime and corruption continue throughout Gotham? Bruce Wayne became Batman to stop the kind of crime that has kids watching their parents die in front of them. And at multiple points in this movie, we see just how much this still matters to Batman. It's often subtle, but nonetheless powerful. In combating the Riddler, and the larger conspiracy behind him, we see Batman become more than just a masked vigilante. We watch him evolve from this masked man who beats up criminals to someone who actually inspires the people of Gotham. But he doesn't do it through big speeches or by throwing his money around. He lets his actions send that message. And by the end, many do hear it, especially Selina Kyle. At its core, The Batman is a detective story wrapped in a superhero movie. But by being the great detective we know Batman is, he becomes a better hero overall, both to himself and to Gotham. That's the true strength of this movie, and why I think it succeeds. But before he succeeds, Batman also faces plenty of setbacks and hardships. On more than one occasion, he outright fails in his efforts. He gets certain clues wrong, and he's unable to stop major parts of the Riddler's plan. He also comes to learn some painful truths about his parents. At no point in this movie does Batman come off as someone with this near supernatural ability to defy the odds, as is often the case in certain comics and TV shows. This is still just a man, a very driven but very human man with very human flaws. He will get wounded. He will get hurt. Punch him and he bleeds like everyone else. Fans can make all the jokes they want about Batman having no superpowers aside from being rich. But his humanity is still a huge part of his appeal. And his frailties only make his achievements all the more impressive. The Batman does plenty to embrace both his frailties and his humanity. The way the movie is shot and the way the story plays out, it all makes for a genuinely unique cinematic experience. And even though that experience runs longer than most superhero movies, clocking in at nearly 3 hours in all, I still really enjoyed it. Now, the movie still has some flaws. At times, the action was a bit hard to follow because of the dark aesthetics. And there are multiple instances where the dialogue just doesn't do enough to fill in certain details. If you're not paying close attention, you may get lost along the way. Also, I think the dynamic between Batman and Selina was a bit mixed at best. Now, there's no doubt they had chemistry. Both Pattinson and Kravitz captured that perfectly in multiple scenes. But even if the attraction and sex appeal was present, other aspects felt a bit contrived. There's definitely a sense that there's a foundation for a relationship here. It's just a bit erratic in this movie. But overall, The Batman is still a great experience. I still contend it's not as good as The Dark Knight, and it's not going to completely redefine the superhero genre. But it does make the case that superhero movies can be more than just spectacles and fancy costumes. While every Batman movie is different, this one feels truly unique on so many levels. it dares to be a different kind of Batman movie, and a different kind of superhero movie overall. It really feels like the kind of Batman movie that does everything it can to stand out in all the right ways. And in this current era of flashy superhero movies, that's a hell of an accomplishment. Even though we shouldn't be that surprised that this movie succeeds. Because after all, he's the goddamn Batman. Thanks for watching, everyone. And thanks for joining me in my world. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, take care and stay safe.